just been introduced to the world. We claim him to be the Messiah, God's Son. We confess him as Lord and Savior of the world. We choose to follow him, and in doing so, we are called disciples of Jesus. So we gather in his name to form his church, which makes us his people, given the mission to build God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. This great responsibility, this amazing role handed to us, is the very reason God created us, to be the co-builders of God's kingdom, a kingdom like no other. A kingdom built on grace, acceptance, mercy, and purpose. The kingdom of God is what every person under the stars craves for their lives. But wait, why is his church in decline? Why doesn't the good news sound like good news to the world? Why aren't his people transforming the world? Why are they so afraid to follow him? Why are we not eager to share his acceptance and grace to outsiders? If this Jesus is real, shouldn't the church be the best place on earth to be? Shouldn't the church be the healthiest, most accepting, and empowering place on the planet? Shouldn't the church be the place people go to find healing, value for their lives, direction, meaning, and purpose? The Jesus culture is simply making Jesus' life, his message, his ministry, and his attitude in our world. Come and grow the Jesus culture with us.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's good to see you. I don't think I'm going to be using this. Do you want that? Unless you want me to sing for you. Thank you. The best ovation I get is when I don't sing. That's wonderful. Thank you. It's good to be here today. Happy Sunday to you. Well, thank you for those who responded. Appreciate that. It's a great day. I love getting together on Sunday mornings. There's a lot of neat things that are happening. It's really neat to stand in the back and watch y'all sing when the band's up there and playing. You're actually starting to get a little bit of rhythm. I'm proud of y'all for doing that, getting some movement, getting some life in you. You know, soon with hey, it's okay to really worship. You know, that'd be kind of neat. Kind of break out of your shell a little bit. So that's been kind of neat to see. A lot of great stuff. If you haven't noticed, some stuff going on behind you in the courtyard, and I'm super excited about the courtyard. That's going to be flattened out there, and then we'll really be a neat place for us to gather together. And on days that are nice, you know, really nice, like those 4 days we have in Texas, we're going to be worshiping out there. We just take it out there, but so we'll just be spontaneous. Hey, great day! Let's go out there and put together worship and do it under the trees, under the sun. So that'd be kind of neat. So I'm pretty excited about that. If you notice, we're really shooting on this theme here for the year. It's really trying to create this Jesus culture. It's trying to help people identify who this Jesus is that we all long to have in our lives. We just don't know what that looks like. And more importantly, we don't know where to go to get it. You think that the church would be like the best place in the world to go to get it, but that hasn't necessarily been the case. And so we're trying to create a culture where that can actually happen, where people can come and to receive the things that they're looking for, deeply needing in their lives. And so we're trying to create that culture. We're focusing that on this year. And so what we're trying to do is really make Jesus a real person, a real figure in our lives. Not only in our lives, but also in the church, but also in our community, in order to make a case for those outside to follow him. And we're going to really look strongly at that. And I think the first step to do that is that we got to do a little bit of decompressing Christmas. Ugh, what have we done? We have to really decompress it, because it seems like every year about Christmas time, we are so anxious for the birth of Jesus that we want to go straight to that birth a month before it happens, right? We want to get out those old hymns, those songs about his birth. Let's just start singing about it. We don't want those hymns that get us ready for that birth, right? We don't want that Advent hymns. We don't want the preparation hymns. We don't want to tend to the soil so it's nice and ready to go by the time Christmas. We want Christmas there. So by the time it happens on the 25th, man, it's over. We're so tired of those Christmas hymns that we want to say, let's put this in the box. Let's get ready for the next event. And so we kind of get lost a little bit. And that is when it's supposed to really get exciting, right? Christ is among us. Now we get to go through this whole time of knowing what that means and how people respond to that. And so we're always trying to move away from his birth when we should be really celebrating his birth. And we really do get caught up in the pageantry, don't we, of Christmas, right? It seems to me that Jesus has become more of the grand finale, right? His birth is that grand finale. That he has come into the world. And so now the grand finale is over, and now we get to leave. So he's more of an ending to a very, very, very expensive season, right? So the trick for us is, how do we make this a real person who has come to us? How can we understand this Jesus, this real person, was delivered to us by a real God who is really trying to get our attention? Really trying to get our attention to bring us back into a real way of living where the whole world benefits. Not just me, not just you, not just us, not just Weatherford, but the whole world can benefit from what this child has to offer. Well, before we can do that, we have to really decompress. And we're going to decompress a little bit by looking at a prayer that Jesus prayed for us indirectly. We say indirectly because, don't know if you know this, that when Jesus was saying this prayer, you didn't say, where's that church in Weatherford in 2019? What do I want to say to them? That didn't happen. The people who wrote this were actually writing to their community, their churches around them. And so we are intercepting their mail. That's what we're doing. So Jesus here is in this prayer, is praying for his followers, us indirectly. And it is a humble prayer. And that's important to know. It's a humble prayer for God's people to remain humble. You can see a theme here. Because the only way to understand Jesus and to live the way that he offers us is to keep ourselves. Anyone who chooses to be has the ability to listen, to follow, to respond to this Jesus, regardless of our age, regardless of our race, regardless of our gender, regardless of our orientation. When we listen. When we learn. When we put aside our selfishness and we practice what he has been teaching us. And then we begin to discover over time this whole new life that we really never knew existed. I want you to listen to the prayer that he prays to us. At that time, Jesus said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intellect, but you reveal them to us, to infants. Yes, Father, for such is your gracious will. And all these things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father. And no one knows the Father except the Son. And anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. So come to me, all of you who are weary, all of you who carry heavy, heavy burdens. I'll give you rest. Take my yoke, my way of life upon you. Learn from me. I'm gentle. I am humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. Because my way of life is easy. My burdens, they're light. Here ends these words. I've been doing a lot of thinking this, lifetime, especially for the last several years, and I think more accurately the last couple of years. A lot of stuff that's going on in the life of churches in general, and trying to put your thumb on it and figure out what it is that makes the church do what it does, and how can we be more relevant to a growing number of people that are residing outside the church and finding other options. But they're seeking what it is that Christ has to offer. And make no mistake about it, there are folks who are on a trend upwards in seeking spiritual guidance for their life. They just can't go to the church, or don't think the church is the place where they find it. And so it's kind of interesting to kind of go through this whole process since my entire ministry of trying to figure out how to grasp it, to make it something that becomes an exciting place to be, and where people's lives are motivated, and they can't wait to get up on Sunday morning to go to church, and to see what's going to happen next, to see where God is going to do for us, and God is going to do through us next. And so I think we're going to talk about a lot of that today, and so we'll call in for pizza if we need to. But there's some things that we just need to start working through. That we've been doing such a great job. The elders and leadership of this church has been doing a great job trying to say, hey, we need to figure this out. Of course, the building is going to reflect some of that as well. But I think for most people in our city, most people in our state, our nation, our world, whether they're Christian or not Christian, when they think of Jesus, I think that they think as someone who lived a long time ago, and somebody that's not really a real person. He's kind of a concept, maybe a theory, maybe a vague personality. Jesus was a really, really nice guy who follows that we're supposed to follow, and those who follow, they formulate this club. And this club is run by those with the most assertive personalities, who tend to be more focused on how that club functions, right? Than following the very teachings of this real person named Jesus. I want us to think about that today. And I'm going to give you some experiences that I've had from my past 30 years of doing this. Man, that seems like a long time. Probably because it is, I'm guessing. But I want us to think about that because I've been a part of churches and groups where the leadership could quote you by heart the bylaws of the church, but had very little to say about the teachings of Jesus, They haven't quite made that connection between this person named Jesus and church, what we call business, right? So we've created this different order within the church. The fact is, the first church I went to when I was in seminary, they told me that your job is to do that religious stuff, You got to pray or do the stuff for the youth, and you preach, you do all that stuff, and you let all this other business stuff, the church, we'll handle that. So you go and do your thing, and we'll do our thing. We're going to separate the two things, is what it basically did. And so when we go to board meetings, we go, oh, yeah, it's a church meeting. Preacher, where are you? Go ahead and pray so we can chop each other up in the name of business when this is over. So there's two parts of the church that began to divide itself. That religious stuff is why we hire that preacher, right? But as business people, we know how to run the church. That's the first observation. Second one is this, is I've also been around a very, very good group of people who follow this list of do's and don'ts. And they inherited this list of their do's and don'ts from past experiences that have been handed down to them from people of faith, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. But they don't know Jesus' lists of do's and don'ts, or just assume that their list is Jesus' lists. Does that make sense to you? Jesus' actions, his behavior, his attitudes are something that we are supposed to emulate within our own lives of those of us who choose to be his followers. There are some non-negotiables that we are supposed to uphold in our lives that were non-negotiable for Jesus. Do you know what those non-negotiables of Jesus are? By the end of this year, you better know what those non-negotiables for Jesus are. Because when we choose to follow this Jesus, there are things that he did that says, we don't get away from this. Because you are going to be the one who shows Christ and God to other people by how you live your life. And so our responsibility is to bend our lives into these ways, the teachings of Jesus, so until we start to stand up, it becomes a natural part of who we are. Does that make sense? The third part I've experienced in congregations and preachers, I'll put myself in that category, is that we tend to operate on two different lists that we create, right? Thank you. We have two lists we create. We have these acceptable sins, right? And then we have these unacceptable sins. Now, these sins that we create are come out of our own backgrounds, whatever they might be. Whatever we've been taught or told, this is what people do, so therefore it's okay to do it even though it's an acceptable sin. And these are things that you just don't do because our society or somebody told us that it's wrong. Those are unacceptable sins. And so how this tends to work is this. The acceptable sins we use to express our beliefs, our feelings, our biases, our prejudice towards our list of unacceptable sins that we see in others, generally that we don't like, right? Or people we don't know. So this is kind of how it works. The acceptable sin that we have come to know and love in the life of the church, it happens everywhere, is to gossip. But we only choose to gossip about people who are in the unacceptable list. Let's say adultery. So which one is the true sin and which is not the true sin? It's the same, isn't it? But one's more acceptable than the other, right? We love to pick on people like that on the right. So much so we will put a fork in them. Got me on that? Another acceptable sin is to withhold grace. Certain groups of people we choose not to like. You can put that whole category list together. But we will withhold grace and cast them out into utter darkness and say they aren't worth anything and they can't do this and they can't do that and they're going to go in the depths of hell. We love to withhold grace. That's an acceptable sin in our society, is it not? It can be at any group that you want. Just pick any new group. Let's say the people that get hammered the most in our society. Who's that group? Homosexuals, right? All of a sudden it becomes acceptable sin to cast them out into utter darkness and call them what we want to call them and do what we want to do, withhold grace from them because we don't accept their sin. If you want to call it a sin, it doesn't even have to be a sin. Does that make sense? It's a game that we play all the time. And then there's a third one that we tend to do. It's acceptable to lash out at people, to act out in anger, right? Throw the old finger at them. If they do this unacceptable sin that we don't like, such as, cut us off in traffic. Now that's right up there. That's one of the big three, I think, in sins, isn't it? Just because we're angry, it means all of a sudden anything I do because I'm a Christian, it's okay. It becomes acceptable to us. So which of the list of 6 up there are acceptable and which are not unacceptable? Come on, church. There's all 6 of them are unacceptable, aren't they? But somehow, some way, we've created these 2 lists. And where does that get us? Because the only acceptable practice that we are to do, to model as a people of God, as these followers of Jesus, is the one acceptable act is what? The only acceptable act is what? Thank you. Love. Or lerv. That's an acceptable practice, all right? We have to figure out how to love better. And that is so deep of a word, folks. It's not a simple thing to say, yeah, I love them. Or as a friend of mine would say, beatings will continue until morale improves. How does that work? Got me? So if we claim to follow Jesus, if we wear the jewelry, if we have the plastic thing on our car, if you are making a statement that I am a Christian, then everything that you do, such as these things, you do this in the name of the one who never did it. Think about that. In fact, we are taught that the only acceptable action that comes from God's people is love. God's love, not our own definition of love. That ends up being an unacceptable sin, right? So there's this major disconnection that we have, really, between the actions of Jesus and Jesus' followers and what he teaches. There's this disconnection. And folks, that's the thing that has to change if the church is going to be revived again. It's going to have to change because it's not possible to follow Jesus if you don't know Jesus. Does that make sense? How can you do what he says if you don't know what he says? Am I making too much sense here? You cannot say you're a Christian if you don't study the man. You cannot follow someone and choose his lifestyle, whose lifestyle we have no clue what he does, except he's some guy a long time ago who was kind of nice. Jesus wasn't always nice. You don't crucify nice people. You don't flog them. You don't create things against him if he's just a good old boy. Doesn't happen. And this whole disconnection that we see in our society is the sole reason, folks, why people across this globe agree with Gandhi, who said this decades ago, that I like your Christ. I don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. Right? It has to change. Because let me tell you what I've learned the last 5 to 10 years. People love this Christ. They have no idea where to find him. How do you feel now? So let's go back to this humble prayer of Jesus. Because this prayer that he prays is really a prayer of thanksgiving. He's looking at the people and he's praying to God in thanksgiving and saying, man, God, thank you so much. Thank you for making this way of life. Thank you for creating something for us that is so simple, so easy for us to get into that even a child can understand it. Even an infant can do this. And then God in God's wisdom says, you know, if you don't like reading, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to give you a visual aid, right? I'm going to show you what God is like. And so God gives us a visual aid in this person that we know is Jesus. And so if you've ever wondered in your life, you know, I wonder what God is like. I wonder what God really values in this world. I wonder how God treats people who struggle with life the way that I have to struggle with life almost every day. And how did God, or how are we supposed to treat people who struggle with life too? Because the answer is right there in this person of Jesus. That's as simple as it can get. Don't let the confusion of all the other books in the Bible that are all over the place get you down. The best way to find out who God is not to start in Genesis and end in Revelation. That's the best way to get a migraine. I'm telling you. That's more confusing than anything else you'll ever try if you don't have any understanding who this is. If you really want to know who Christ is, who God is, read Christ. Stick with that. Keep it simple until you start to get a really clear picture of who this person is. Because that will tell you who this God is. Start for that. So from now on, the most important person in your life is who? I know you're sitting next to your spouse, and you're in trouble when you get home. I know you got kids. Sometimes we want to think it's the most important people. We have the most feelings toward them. But the most important person in your life has to be Jesus, because if it's not, who's going to set the tone for the rest of your relationships, right? Who's going to teach you how and show you how to be a better human being? And by being a better human being, it just goes into the rest of other relationships that you have. Most important person has to be this Jesus figure, because he sets the whole tone, sets the foundation for who we're trying to be like. And if we practice that at home, with our kids, at the workplace, everywhere else that we go. The most important books in the Bible that you need to read and get engaged in has to be the Gospels. Those are really struggle for us to understand as it is, but they have to be the number one books in the Bible for us. If we focus on God as it revealed to us in this person of Jesus, if we take him for his word, if we trust what he has to say and do what we are capable of doing to bend our lives to fit into his world until we can begin to wear it naturally, then we're slowly going to receive the promise that is made to us through this prayer. When Jesus says to them, "Come to me, folks, come to me. I will give you rest. Take my way of life into you. Learn from me. I am humble. I am gentle. You will find rest for your souls. Because my burdens are light compared to your burdens." You have any burdens? Am I the only one? Think about the burdens we carry on with us. We'll just name a few right now. Anybody have burdens at home? Think about that. Marriage, that sometimes could be something that we have to work on really hard, very intentionally. What about finances? How many of you, well, I'll put it this way. I haven't gotten a text message from you to say, "Dan, I got too much money. Where do I put it?" Please help me, please. I'm drowning in green stuff. How about time for family? Is that a burden? Because we're here, we're there, we're everywhere, and we just can't seem to find time to do the things that we know we need to do. What about that? Kids. You know, just when you think everything's settled down, something else comes up. And they're learning to try to figure out life, and we have to teach it to them. And then we're at the age 2, and now we've got to deal with our parents. What are we going to do with them? And they don't live next door anymore, do they? Oh, they're in another state, by the way. So let me change all my schedules from work and everywhere else to go and take care of something that needs to be taken care of. And then you have now in our day and age, we have kids, friends. His parents are lost, and they don't know what to do, so we end up taking them in. And so it adds more to the things that we're trying to do. That's just one. And then you move on to work, where they say, "Don't worry about coming in and working. We'll just keep putting your money in your account," right? Isn't that what happens? Probably not. They don't say, sometimes you have long hours. Sometimes you're not getting paid enough. Sometimes it gets frustrating because of people you got to deal with, right? There's not even security in our jobs. Sometimes we wonder if this is where I'm supposed to be. Is my job will be here next year? This is where I want to do with my life? You know, there's so many things, and that my job's doesn't make me happy. I get grumpy, and my kids have to deal with that, and it brings over the family. It's not fulfilling. Every day is the same, it seems like. Every Monday through Friday, routine, and God, I got to do this until 34 more years, and I get to give up and retire, right? So work can be a burden on a lot of things that we do because we're constantly thinking ahead about what we need to do to take care of our home. That's adding burdens. Oh, well, let's talk about school, shall we? I get a FaceTime from my daughter, Kaylin, right? And she's at TCU, and she's texting me and talking to me on the phone, says, what am I going to do? I've got these classes. I got in this class, and all these classes have all these books, and she turns her phone around, there's a stack of books. That's just one class, Dad. And I've got tests, I got papers, I got to do all this. I'm a slow reader. What am I going to do? And so this is her pre-panic, right? So we do the pre-panic before we actually get into the panic mode. And so, you know, why wait until you actually have an assignment due to get all your worrying in? Let's start now, right? We'll start months in advance to get this out of the way. That way we're nice and warmed up so we can panic appropriately when the time comes, right? We love to worry. We love to panic. And that's just school, because there's always certain things that take place in our lives. And then we have our friends, right? Even our friends are that way. All this drama sometimes gets played out with all the friends that we have or don't have, right? Feuding, trust issues, hidden expectations. It's just like, man, I don't want to mess with this. And no, let's don't forget recreation, right? Remember the good old days where you could actually go play baseball and then go swimming and then go hang out with your friends and go play in the woods? Not anymore. If you're going to be anything that's any type of project, it's now a full-time job. And you know, if you want to play baseball, guess what you're going to do? We're going to practice 2-3 hours a day, and then we're going to take you away on weekends and put you on this field for 12 hours in the August sun and tell you to like it. And if you don't do it, you're not going to play. And you're going to be at those practices. And so all of a sudden, we got to drive across town. We got to stay in Dallas and go to this echo chamber they call volleyball courts for 300 screaming girls. Yeah, that's the thing I want to do. I'm getting all burdened and worked up already, man. I need to go home. Think about all the burdens that we carry. That's our life. That's it. I don't think it's getting better. I don't think it's getting better. What about God's burdens for us? What are those? Can you list them? There were 4. There are 3. The 4th one was wash the preacher's truck, but Dan made me take that out. He said he'd do it. There's 3 expectations that God puts on us. And all 3 of them do not take life away. They revive us. It's crazy, isn't it? The more time you put into God, the more rest you get. Go figure that one. First one is this. Worship consistently. This is where we find our rest. It's not sleeping in because I've had a long weekend. I had to work all week, and so now I need to get those extra 28 hours tonight to sleep. Because I'm going to be so revived to get ready back to work next week, right? It doesn't work that way, does it? This is where you get your rest, is in your worship, not in bed. Rest comes from God who is waiting for you, waiting to claim you as his own. A God who is trying to remind you that you are a valuable child of God and you're the most special person in his life. God is one of those parents that secretly talks to each child and says, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. You're my favorite. And means it. This is where we find our rest. This is where we get rejuvenated. This is where we're reminded of who we are and to whom we belong. And God then calls us out to be a part of the world. and waits for us to respond to God. Worshiping consistently is why we come in here, we've had a rough week, we had struggle get the kids out of bed, their hair looks all matted up. We're going to go anyway, and we've got all these, and then when we leave, we feel different, don't we? We wonder, why don't I do this every week? And then Monday comes and reminds us, right? So expectation, worship consistently, it'll build you up, not tear you down. Second thing he wants us to do, you need to be part of a group. A group that is committed to growing and learning in Him. A group that is committed to growing in His relationship. Because it is here that you really begin to understand the joys of living with a community of people who are trying to get through life and all those burdens just as you are. It becomes a place where we can share and laugh and cry and deal with all of our stuff in the safety of a group of people who truly care, where we can put all of our heavy burdens and rest them on there and get it out in the open. We need good people, folks. Good people in our lives to support us, to encourage us to continue to do the things that we need to do, to keep reminding us that this journey in Christ doesn't stop whenever you join a church. It's a thing that lasts for a whole lifetime and puts us on new levels of understanding the more and more we go on. And the third expectation he has of us is just serve. And that's a tricky word. This is not about just finding something to volunteer and do. It's nothing to do with that. It might be the same, but it doesn't have anything to do with that. Because there is a ministry with your name on it. There are activities that feed your soul that you actually go to help people. You know, we have people that do every Sunday. We've got a group of people run off and do communion to shut-ins. And so there'll be one lady in the church, they'll be at a Arbor House or something, and they'll go and take communion to her, and they give communion to her, and what happens, Lynn, is that you get about 10, 15, 20 people coming around and wanting to be a part of something that special. And by the time you leave and you get back, you scratch your head saying, I think I got more out of that than they did. And we start to feel guilty because we feel good. Does that make sense? That's God's way of giving you a reward. Look what you've done, my good and faithful servant. You're serving people. It's giving you life. It's rejuvenating who you are. If you are serving somewhere in the church and it's a burden, get out. Stop doing that. Because there is a place that you are capable of going and things that you're capable of doing that matches who you are to a T. And once you find it and discover it, you'll come back feeling guilty because I feel good. Right? It's there. So everything, the three expectations that God asks us to do is all about lifting us up, building us up, making us feel great about who we are and what we're discovering God is leading us to do. Those are three wonderful things, expectations. And what he says to us is what? That's how you give rest to your soul. And all that weariness and all those burdens, bring to me. You're going to find something a whole lot better than what you can find at the other places. And some of those things we have to deal with. That's life. But here, it gives life. It gives us what we need. We will be rejuvenated. We will be filled with hope. We will be filled with direction. We will be filled with confidence. And you know what happens? All of a sudden, that Christ all of a sudden becomes real in who you are and what you do. And all of a sudden, those unacceptable and acceptable sins, you don't even pay attention to that. Because all you want to do then is every human being you meet on the face of this earth, you just want to love them. Without expectations. Without any hidden agendas. You just want to be Christ to them. You don't have to gossip about them. What a burden that is to be lifted off. Just love them. That's it. Simple. Even a child can do it. And they do, don't they? You know they do. We can be like that if we try. We're going to come to this table, and we're going to share in a wonderful meal that has been prepared for us. And this meal is life-giving. but it's also a table that reminds us of who we are and what we're capable of doing, because we're not just helpless consumers of life. God says, I am going to give you life, but I want you to pass it on to others. You're here as just an ordinary person, and when you leave with the Christ inside of you, you do extraordinary things. So this table is a table that gives but also receives what you have to offer. There's response cards that you have with you to fill them out during our time of prayer, or afterward people come up to do communion, and invitations for communion. But communion is for you to come forward and when you are ready. Not when everybody's just shooting up and hitting in there, like we're trying to get somewhere. When you are ready. And also, when we're taking communion, we'll be singing. And when you come sing, remain standing as we sing this last hymn together and celebrate in majesty of our God who's come to us. And let's give thanks to God for that. So let us pray. We are thankful, God, that you come to us in such astounding ways, that you trust us with everything that you have given us, including your Son, Christ. Even though he died and we're responsible for that, you still give us back to us, and you trust us with him. But he also does this with a promise that if we continue to follow this person and learn of this person, that we'll find a whole different life that we didn't know exists. And those are things that really make us who we are. So help us in our time, we pray, as we gather around your table, as we gather with this community of people, to look deep inside our souls and to trust what you have placed there. And help us to respond in ways that we struggle to respond to. But teach us to trust. Teach us to reach out. Teach us to say, today is that day that I give myself in the direction of God. Guide us in all things that we say and do, and be with us as we handle these things that are precious to us, your body and your blood, and as we give ourselves to you at this table. In Christ's name, amen.